most of the time that I remember, there was a table in the living room that was his desk. Then later he set up an office in the basement, but it was basically in the middle of the house that he sat down at his desk, and that would be like, by this time, 8, 9 o'clock, and he'd work till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning on his writing.
From his books, you would think he was first a children's writer, because the first books he published were Shmerel Nar, The Wandering Beggar in English, Robert's Adventures, The Clever Little Tailor, all his children's books.
And they take from the nevi'im, all written as sort of educational material for Jewish children. After dinner, he would sit down at his desk and would write until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then go to sleep and wake up after maybe 3, 4 hours and go to work. And then the only break in that would come from time to time when the rest of us would sit around, my mother and my 2 sisters and I, and would listen to him reading aloud what he had written by hand in Yiddish the night before. He had this vision as a secular Jew, steeped in Jewish history, Jewish ethical values, their cry for justice and for freeing the oppressed. Those were the values of Judaism that should be preserved. He didn't believe in any of the rituals. So he wrote these books in Yiddish for children to read, and the theory that all the children of that generation would be learning Yiddish and reading this and learning the traditions and what we've achieved over some 2,000 or more years of history would enable secular Judaism to flourish in America.
Well, I mean, we had the books in the house. He read the stories to us. As a kid, we read them also. We enjoyed them. And they were sort of just a part of the family. They were an important part of just sort of who we were as a family. In the wider Jewish audience, his Chelm books were the most successful and the most widely disseminated. I think they were actually reasonably successful in Yiddish before they were translated. My Uncle David did the translations.
Helden von Chelm, which is transliterated, has the ring to it. I mean, sarcastically, the heroes of Helm. In English, the wise men of Helm. That one is still in print. Still, a lot of people I meet have read that book at one time or another. And then a second volume called More Tales from Helm.
Mostly I remember the children's stories, like the Wise Men of Helm and More Wise Men of Helm and Still More Wise Men of Helm, I think, was something that I came back to with each of my children and pulled them out and read those stories.
I used to read them as bedtime stories, Sophia and Jeffrey, the twins. There's that quality of laughing at yourself and not taking life too seriously, and the whole idea of the fool and being fooled. And I think that these are universal themes.
His Chelm stories were the stories on which generations of American Jews grew up and learned about that set of stories. There are many versions of those stories. Many Jewish writers have taken a crack at them, but his versions were the Chelm stories that people grew up on, both in Yiddish and then in the English translations. And then he also wrote about everything else. He wrote about religion. He wrote about being a Jew in the modern world. He wrote about Israel and Zionism, and he wrote about identity in the largest sense of the word. So his interests were always grounded in Yiddish language and in Judaism, but within that universe, he had broad-ranging interests.